can have.
Sophist and Gorgias were alive in the 5th century BC, and they were famous rhetoricians. They mainly taught arete, or arete, which was the use of rhetoric for political gain. They were a lot like modern-day politicians, and they used similar tactics that you would find in political debates, such as lying. They tried to convince their audience of anything, in any way possible, and they always used the most efficient language to do so. And they were widely criticized by a lot of their peers, such as Plato, Aristotle, and Socrates. However, ironically enough, all of the information, or at least most of the information we have, comes from these three men. And this leaves anyone who is looking to learn more about the Sophists to sift through piles and piles and piles of information in order to just find the simple facts. And now, Zach will explain a little bit more about Gorgias.
Gorgias, he was born in circa 480, and he lived all the way through 376 BC. He was about 109 when he died. Little is known about his early history, except that he was born in Sicily, and in his 60s he fled to Athens during during a war in Greece. And when he was in Athens, he became a sophist and became a teacher of the sophist philosophy. One of his pupils was Isocrates, and all throughout the rest of his life, he was never married and he never had any children. And now that you know a little bit about who Gorgias is, Anna will explain the style of the sophists.
The Sophists, not their style. I'm not explaining their style. The Sophists were not well liked by Aristotle and Plato and Socrates. They made lots of controversy over the fact that they were some of the first teachers to actually charge their students to be enrolled in their classes. Plato and Aristotle and Socrates all believed that knowledge should be spread to everyone despite their income or how much money they made. And because of this, they did not really see eye to eye. The Sophists mainly taught upper-class young men, and they taught them about political rhetoric to influence whoever it was they were speaking to. Their main topic was arete, and that was formerly used to describe physical strength or courage, but around the time when they started teaching, there was a shift, and the shift led to more focus on politics, and they took full advantage of this and made a lot of money. They basically taught people how to win any case, no matter how bad it was, because in that time, you didn't have a lawyer, you had to just basically use your own mouth to prove your case, even if you were wrong. And the Sophists did this quite well. And now, Zach.
Gorgias, being one of the sophists, his style was a newer style of rhetoric. He used prose. He made his speeches more poetic. In doing this, Plato disagreed in this style because he saw rhetoric as more of something to convict men and have them decide what their own beliefs on a subject was. The style that Gorgias taught was the style of prose, which what Plato thought was adding a type of opinion to what he talked about instead of conveying information to people and having them take that in. he also used paradox and logic in his speech, which I will explain later. He would also take he also liked to take weak arguments and make them into a stronger argument. For example, his argument for this was the story of Helen, how she went away with Paris and committed adultery with him. He gave the examples of why she went away and said in the end that it wasn't her own doing. It was kind of a will of fate. And in the end, Plato, Aristotle, and Socrates did not agree with his style of rhetoric because, again, it was used as a type of convincing people instead of conveying information. And Aristotle said that it was too much of poetry. He thought it had too much style within it, and it was, in a way, too creative. And now that we've seen what the style of Gorgias is, we will now talk on the works of the Sophists.
There aren't very many surviving works left in the Sophists. There are a few extensive speeches and quotes here or there, such as one by Protagoras, one of the main men in the Sophists. And this was, "A human being is the measure of all things. Of those things that are, that they are, and of those things that are not, they are not." And this has been widely used and remembered from him because they were all very logical people and philosophers. And all we have left really of them is what Plato and Aristotle and Socrates have written, which doesn't give us much to go on. One thing that was important about the Sophists was a quote from Gorgias about existence.
I wasn't ready for that. How did you do this? Basically, in one of his arguments, which was an example of paradox, he gave the example, it was from his essay on nature. Nothing exists is the first point. Even if it exists, it cannot be known. Even if it could be known, it cannot be communicated, which I personally think is a bunch of gibberish, and it doesn't cope well. Anyways, most of his works, as Hannah has said, are now lost, and what is known about the works usually come from other sources. The known works that he has is the essay on nature, which I just explained. He has a handbook of rhetoric, which is now lost, and several other essays, which are fragmented. And now that we have heard about the works of Gorgias, we will now be closing.
The main contention of the Sophists and Gorgias was to use prose and to sound more poetic. They used similar practices as Hitler and other politicians now, like Obama and Martin Luther King. And this helped them become a lot more influential. And they used specific words to hold the interest of their audience. This made them lots of enemies and lots of money. And they were all respected, feared, and hated because they could convince anyone of anything, whether it was that wrong was right or right was wrong. And they could win any case, much like lawyers are today. The Sophists, he gave me the middle finger. Using a lot of the techniques that the Sophists utilized in their speeches will give anyone a good idea on how to be more influential when talking to their parents, their peers, their friends, family, their boss, or their coworkers, and can easily help you convince people of any lie you want to convince them of.